What's up, you guys? BellaRose here. Welcome to the Pastor Mrs podcast. You can already see who's here with me, and I'm so excited to be having this conversation today. Laju is a very good friend of mine, and I'm excited for many reasons, which you will find out as we go along. The Pastor Mrs podcast is set up to celebrate female ministers and women whose husbands are pastors for a lot of reasons. Partially because some of these women are also being used by God in their own ministries. They may not be as prominent as their husbands, but God is using them mightily for his people. There are also lots of myths about why some pastors' wives go into ministry as maybe a way of micromanaging their husbands or just being around so that their husbands don't just roam free. And that may not be true. We'll talk about that sometime in the podcast. But even more importantly, it is to celebrate these women in their own rights as female ministers. So please make welcome to the Pastor Mrs. podcast, Pastor Mrs. LajuIren.
Thank you.
So I know first off that you are more than just a pastor. There's like the A to Z.
Won't you allow me to do my welcome speech before you start asking me questions?
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. It's not every day that they invite you to BellaRose show. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Bella. I forgot to thank my fans, my mommy and my daddy, my husband, without whom I would not be a pastor's wife, my church members.
Yo, this is Laju that many people don't know. Laju is playful.
Yeah, I am very playful. I'm also very serious. I shall not smile again throughout the end of this.
Why?
The end of this.
We need your smile. You have a beautiful smile.
To be nice, or to try not to smile. Could it work?
It couldn't work. So tell me about the A to Z L, because you're more than just a pastor. What are the other crowns you wear?
I will start by saying that I'm extremely grateful to be a pastor and a pastor's wife. The fact that I'm not just a pastor or a pastor's wife doesn't mean that being a pastor's wife or being a pastor is something.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, and out of all the things that I've been called to do, I'm most grateful to serve in those capacities. So A to ZL is a nickname that a lot of people have for me because in church they call me PL.
Yeah.
So PL for Pastor Laju.
Yep.
And I'm also a filmmaker. So some people say DL or
yes, you're an author.
Yeah, I'm an author. So AL or executive producer, Laju EPL. So some people say, oh, A to ZL, mommy to beautiful girls. So ML. I'm a writing coach. So CL. I'm a businesswoman. So BL.
What?
I'm a daughter. So another DL.
There you
go. I'm just coming up with some of these things that I'm talking to you. Yeah. So I think that one thing that I've learned is. At the beginning of the year, the Lord told me, said, whatever the assignment is, you've been prepared for it. So you can do as occasion demands. But I think at the basis of it all is knowing that what defines me isn't really the things I do or the positions that I hold, but whose I am. And so first of all, I'm someone who is born again and loves the Lord. I'm a daughter of God. And so that kind of defines me. And then every other thing is a role that I'm privileged to play. And I think that many times people are so defined by the roles, and there are going to be seasons in your life where you're playing a prominent role in some areas and you're not playing a prominent role in some other areas. So it has to come from whose you are and not what you're doing per time.
Thank you for coming to this podcast, guys. It's a wrap.
Without close.
No, but that was really, really brilliant. Now to the purpose of this podcast. Talk to me about being in a relationship with someone like Pastor. Because he's in the ministry since your university days.
Yes, he has been.
I know for some young women out there, maybe even me inclusive, when we were younger, we said things like, we never marry a pastor. And then for some of us, we have in fact gone into ministry as single women. Some of us have gotten married to pastors. But talk to me about being in that kind of space as an undergraduate.
Okay, first of all, I used to be one of those people that used to say I'll never marry a pastor. Strange, right? I said there are some P's I will not marry: pastor, politician, pilots, and police. Wow. But then I met my husband when we were both undergraduates. We didn't start dating then, actually. We were friends. He was actually first my pastor. He was first a friend. He was first a friend stroke crush. But then I moved on from that, and then ministry started when he was in 200 level and I was in 100, and I was a part of that. So it was my friend starting a youth fellowship, and then I became a part of that, and then shortly after he became my mentor and then my pastor. So it was called TTYF then, the Triumphant Youth Fellowship, which now evolved into Life Triumphal Church in 2011. It now became Celebration Church, I think, in 2013, thereabout, or end of 2012.
The evolution.
Yeah, so it's been really beautiful to just watch and be a part of. So when it comes to ministry itself, I have a personal conviction. I actually became a pastor in the youth fellowship.
The TTYF.
Yes. So I remember my husband, who was my pastor or mentor at the time, I think I was somewhere in chapel, and he said, God told me to ordain you a pastor. Like, and people else, I'm looking at it, I was like, oh, these undergraduates just calling themselves pastors.
Were you like really interested in ministry at the time?
Oh yes, I was. I was very involved. I started as my friend was going to start something, and then it became. I'm one of the oldest. Of course, there's some people that maybe we all joined around the same time, but I think I'm one of the oldest people in ministry. So I have a personal conviction for the work. Even if I wasn't dating my husband, I think I would still be definitely still pastoring here, definitely still serving here. So it's kind of different for me because ministry came first.
Yeah.
I got over the crush, we became friends, then he became my father in the Lord, my daddy in the Lord, my pastor, my leader, my mentor.
Hey.
And then it was actually, we had been in ministry for a while together before we now actually started dating. So ministry started, I think, in 2009, late 2009, and I was serving there. I was only the pastor in 2011.
Okay.
And then we started dating, was it 2011 or 2010? I can't remember, one of the two. I think 2010.
Okay.
But we started dating in 2011. So but I think it's still easier for me now to actually relate to my husband as my pastor, because yes, of course, as I think the pastor thing is easier and the marriage thing is beautiful, but I think it's sometimes more complicated, maybe because I've had more experience with the pastoring.
So I was going to ask how that transition was, going from looking at this person as a spiritual leader, looking at this as a pastor, to looking at him as a lover.
That's a good question. I think that the reason why I think it was quite easy with my husband was we're also friends. And then because of the kind of person that he is, so like the way people even regular church members now, there's a way we relate, like pastor, there's honor, but there's also this informal, and he's always been that kind of person that you could be yourself around, even though of course you respect him, he does mighty things and everything by the grace of God. But I think his leadership style, and then the fact that we kind of had a friendship that evolved, kind of really helped, because he really was, I think, one of my closest friends before we started dating as well. So it wasn't just I'm now the pastors. Yeah. There was a lot of so for example, around the time we were graduating, many of the people who were joining ministry that were around our age were either on IT. So the people in some of the pastors, for example, like maybe Pastor Michael, Port Harcourt. Right. Many of our pastors have been with us from school days, over a decade. So he was on IT at that time. So in school, it was basically just both of us. In final year, I was in 400, he was in 500. So we really had time to really build the friendship itself.
Wow. So when you were leaving school, right, and then having to, for lack of a better word, join the real world, were there any specific challenges that you faced as ministry people and as a couple?
I think that the kind of leadership that pastor has provided and the kind of call upon his life has always been so clear to me, to the point that even when we were doing things that maybe other people thought were small, they were big in my own eyes, because I felt, okay, this is what God will have us do, this is where he will have us be. So it was always exciting. So now people see Celebration Church as a big deal, because thank God for growth in their eyes, but it's always been a big deal for us. And I think that that's the reason why even when we get bigger, it will still be about, okay, what will God have us do? And that's why for him, nothing is too small, nothing is too big, because we've never really cared about people's perspective, quote and unquote. We've cared more about obeying the Lord and then really taking the world for him. I think that's always been what's been most important to us. So challenges when stepping out, I think that it was just a really great learning curve. I was telling them about how when we first started church, it was in a very interesting area in Ikotu. Right. And the roads, I still go there once in a while. And the roads there.
Why do you go there?
Family, friends.
Okay.
Around that area to visit, right? And sometimes I'll say, do you know that this is where church started? And I'll talk about how, because I lived in my family house was in Festac, then we weren't married then. And then after a while, when we got married, we moved to Agon. I'll tell them about, I used to enter bus from here, from Festac straight to Sele. And one time I entered bus and there was no traffic and I was happy, and then the bus just got stuck in the middle of mud. And I was going to church and I had to come down, put my leg inside the mud. Then you come out of the mud and use pure water to wash your leg. Then you continue going back. But I think it's just really always been an honor to serve. I was sharing about how when we first, I was thinking about it just this morning, really, about how when we first had 120 people in attendance, I was like, oh my God. It was like, Jesus Christ, wow. And then we moved from there to Ikeja City Mall, and just to see the growth and the progress. I think I'm really extremely grateful for the leadership of my husband, and then for the hand of God upon Celebration Church in particular. I truly believe that God called us to be able to start ministry in these times. And it's just really, I think that every challenge just reminds us about the one who has sent us, because he's always made a way.
Yes.
Right? And then it's also really helped us as people, helped us build character, knowing that it was really the Lord who brought us all the way, and he's still going to carry us the way he's taking us to.
So one thing that people who are maybe outside of ministry, or people who are looking from outside, see on pastors is, it must be very challenging for pastors to deal with female congregation, right? Female congregants, it's like, and it must be difficult for his wife as well. Some are of the opinion that the wife has to be very watchful, she has to be very present, she has to also be protective to a large extent. Was that something that you had to deal with, where maybe you felt like, I am the pastor's wife, so I have to, this is my property? Was that something that you ever had to maybe... How do
I answer this question now? I think that first of all, it starts with who you marry. If you marry a man who, even though he's a pastor, has the propensity to cheat or be unfaithful, how many places do you want to follow him to? Like, do you want to put a tracking device on him? So I think that many people just focus on, oh, I'm marrying a pastor. But I always tell people that you're marrying a man, not the office. So you must always gauge the character of the person you're marrying. Everybody can be tempted, but it helps when you choose somebody who has a good head on his shoulders, who will not just be faithful to you because he loves you, but because he fears God and loves the Lord. Because you can't ask him to only pastor the males in the congregation, right? So that's a very good first step, to choose somebody who loves the Lord, who fears the Lord, and has a good head on his shoulders and is disciplined. I think another thing is both of you have to work together to be sure that you are transparent with each other. Sometimes some people will send my husband a message and he will say, come and see, come and see.
Full disclosure.
Come and see what's going on. So I think that many times you have to kind of both work together to cover for each other in that sense. But if you start with the constant monitoring, then you put the person in a very uncomfortable position where they can't really do the work that God has called them to do, and then it affects you, it affects the marriage. But there has to be constant checks and balances, because there will always be people like that who have a crush on the pastor.
Yeah.
But I think that generally I have to also give it to our people. It's not as common. It happens, it can happen, but it's not as common. I think generally we have people who love us as a family and love their pastor, but in a sensible way. So I don't always.
Did you ever have that fear?
This question. I think that in every marriage you might cross your mind once in a while, but I'm grateful for the man that I married, and I'm grateful for God. He's the one who secures my lot. And then what we've tried to as a family constantly is to be transparent with one another, to talk about it. Like this friendship, even not just for him too, but for me. If I have a friendship with a male person, I tell them okay, and then if we feel like there are boundaries that need to be put in place, we're very open to talking about those boundaries. So both of you have to kind of be transparent and have those boundaries, and just know that you might be sincere, but not everybody is sincere. So that means that there has to be an intentionality, because if you just leave everything to chance,
deliberate.
So you have to be intentional and deliberate and trust the Lord.
So I like how you put it when you said you're marrying the man and not the office, and it makes me think of the office of a pastor's wife. Some people think that there has to be an office of the pastor's wife, sort of like the debate around having the office of the first lady. Does a woman married to a pastor have to be a pastor herself?
No, I don't think so. I think that every woman who is married to a pastor is called to ministry, but not necessarily to pulpit ministry. Every woman marrying a pastor is called to ministry, but not necessarily to pulpit ministry, because if a man is called to do a particular work, there are things that you need to do to make that work to succeed as his wife. Your husband can't be a pastor and then you are just neutral. You're like, there are things you're going to have to do behind the scenes. Sometimes it might be on the scenes, but many times behind the scenes to actually make the work prosper. So even if you say, oh, I'm not called to be a pastor, it doesn't mean that you are not called to ministry. It could be that your role in ministry is ensuring that you pray for
welfare.
Yeah, ensuring that you and that for me, even though I pastor myself, it's still a major part of what I do, because my husband doesn't really eat, so I have to feed him. I say, okay, let's make sure understanding that you are called to ministry. There are going to be times where you are called to travel. Is it the pastor alone that will travel? So the person that is following you to travel is in a sense called to ministry, even though it may not be pulpit ministry. I think that if a woman is called to pulpit ministry, it has to be a personal conviction and a personal call. And there's really no hard and fast rule about it. I feel like if you respect your pastor, you honor your pastor, you should honor his wife, whether or not she's a pastor. So it's not a debate of, oh, she's not a pastor, should I? You can't be claimed to respect or honor someone and not honor their spouse. That's improper. And you don't really honor or love someone if you don't love their spouse. So there's that about that. But I think that a call to be a pastor, it's a calling on its own. Because if you're called to be a pastor, it's just tied to the marriage. What happens when, and it does happen in pastors' marriages, where things are not going so smoothly. So do you dump the call? No, in the marriage. So do you dump the call because the person that made me, the person for which I'm a pastor is not? Do you understand? So, because now you are also accountable to the Lord who's called you, accountable to the flock. All pastors' wives don't have to be pastors, but if God has called you, that's absolutely fine. If God has called you to ministry, that's absolutely fine. And even if He hasn't called you to ministry, you are still called to ministry, and there's honor in that, there's a grace in that, and there's a blessing in that.
So I know you did say that there's no hard and fast rule to sort of knowing the ministry that you're called to, but for women who are watching right now, who are pastors' wives, who may feel like they're being disrespected in the church, or who feel like they don't know where they fit, how can they find a place to fit in?
I think that's a beautiful question. I'll never forget reading a book a while back. I can't even remember if it was by Papa Hagin's wife or if it was by Mama Faith Oyedepo, one of the two. I read quite a number of those books just before I got married. And the book was talking about how there are two people you need to please: your husband and God. Like, some people just say, oh, well, I think it was another book I was reading where they said, oh, something is not working in the church, let's call the pastor's wife. There's no sweat. Call the pastor's wife. So people have like different definitions of what a pastor's wife should be doing. Maybe she should be able to sing, or she should. I can't really sing. I can't. It's not. I'm not that horrible, but singing maybe like number 16 on the list of things I can
16.
do.
That's far.
Yeah, it's very far.
It's like SL. Singer Laju.
I don't think I'm worthy to have singer behind my name. I don't want to. So I sing in the bathroom is different from singing. Yeah, or a pastor's wife must be in children's church, or a pastor's wife must be this or that. I think that it's important to please the Lord and to make sure your husband is happy. And for someone like my husband, he always wanted a woman that could preach. So he wanted someone that was actually called to also do the work. And I think that's one of the things he likes most about me. Like, oh, you preach really, he really likes all those kind of
bust my brain.
Yeah. He enjoys that a lot. But for some pastors, just want a woman that loves them and is a career woman, or is happy serving as a housewife but loves him, is brilliant in her own regard. So it truly comes down to, what will the Lord have you do, and what does your husband need? Not every pastor needs their wife to be a preacher, and the ones who need their wives to be preachers, it would be good for them to choose a woman that has a propensity to be a preacher in the first place, and not just marry someone and then start saying, oh, you must. Of course, there are areas where my husband has maybe pushed me to express myself a little more ministry-wise, but at least the seeds were there already. Do you understand? So I think it comes down to that. I think, of course, you also have to realize that even when you're not preaching, people are watching you, and
your life is a message.
That I have to say that statement with a sense of responsibility, because some people have the opinion that everybody's watching and so they must do things to please people, and some people are like, I don't really care what anybody thinks. But there has to be a balance where you realize that it's not what people think that defines who I am, but that because I'm living my life as unto the Lord, I must live in such a way that if people see it, they will give glory to the Lord. But the truth is that you won't always get it right 100%. As a pastor's wife, you just feel like you're in a fishbowl. I remember some services sitting down and thinking, everybody's looking at me. Everybody. And my husband used to say something. He says, if you think nobody's watching, you're fooling yourself. But if you think everybody's watching, you're full of yourself or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So just that balance is very, very important. And then just growing into your own. Like I always tell, like, and by God's grace now we have a lot of our pastors who are married. Yeah. So I'm always very excited to just touch their eyes and I say, don't even bother yourself. Are you happy? Do you feel you're doing? Are you happy in the space that God has put you? Do you feel like you're pleasing the Lord? Is your marriage okay? Every other thing will come in place. If you're taking on new roles, or don't feel like you have to be under pressure to perform, just love the Lord, love your family. Do you understand? Do your best. Of course, there are some times where you need to be more intentional about dressing, more intentional, but it still comes down to giving glory to God and not necessarily pleasing people.
So there's also one thing I sometimes feel like pastors' wives really deal with, right? A lot of times, the pastor goes before the pastor misses, right? He's more prominent, he's more popular. Sometimes people can even say stuff like he's more anointed, even though his wife is a preacher. Is that something that you've had to deal with, where you may feel like my husband is a lot more anointed than I am, and his messages are more fiery, and I may have to play catch up?
I think that it's never really been for me a competition. I think now by God's grace I pastor a branch, but I would have been very happy not pastoring a branch because it really is not a competition for me. I think that it's an honor to cover for the family in some areas if need be, so that he can focus on the work that God has called him to do, especially because he's a leader, he's a pioneer. I think that many people have learned to lead, but not many people have learned to follow. And so really following my husband as my lead pastor is an honor for me. So I don't really think that, of course, I feel like it should, I talk about it, I say, sometimes you say he's not ready. I say, you, apostle, you're not ready. And they say, what about you? And he will mimic me. But it's never really been, at least not for preaching or ministry. I've never really felt like I needed to compete with him. I think it's okay in many areas if he increases and I decrease in that particular area, because first of all, he's the lead pastor, and he's the apostle of the ministry, and I'm very, very happy and okay with that. And it still comes down to defining yourself not by what you do, but by who you are. So if you define yourself by how many times I preached or whose message was more, you are a team. And sometimes in a team, it's okay to put your best foot forward. And many times that best foot is the person who God has anointed for that office as head of mission, head of the home. And then really many of the things that I teach and many of the ways that I teach, of course, there are bits of my personality in it, but many of the things that I teach, most of the things I teach, and many of the ways I present things when I teach, or when it comes to working charismatic, I learned from him.
Right.
Do you understand? So it's just really an honor to be a daughter of Pastor Iren. Like, so it's an honor for me, actually.
So you also, beyond being a pastor, like we mentioned at the start of this, you do a lot of other things. You're an author, a published author. You are a film director. You are a writer. You do a ton of things. You're a coach as well. For some women, or maybe some pastors' wives, it feels like I need to do something, quote unquote, of my own to have an identity away from my husband. First off, is that a bad thing? And was that the case for you?
This question, it was among the list of questions you said to me that I'm going to answer.
I have put you in the hot.
You have now put me in the hot. But I'm now thinking, how do I respond to this? I think it still comes down to doing what God will have you do. I think that's what it comes down to, and I truly believe that finding the different expressions for all the things that God has called you to do is important. But what I'll tell pastors' wives many times who may be, especially if your other expressions are ministry inclined, is, and this may sound somehow to some people, but anybody that is a pastor's wife has devoted their life to consecration, so they understand, is express yourself within your area of permission. And I'll explain what that means. If it's a ministry thing, I'm not going to jump ahead of my husband, right? So I wouldn't probably hold a spiritual program that he doesn't approve of. Do you understand? So ministry wise, I've learned to work within my area of permission, not say God told me to do this thing and I must do it, my husband is saying don't do it. Do you understand?
Now you strong head.
And then maybe sometimes you say God told me to teach women how to be submissive to their husbands, and you're saying I should not do it, and you don't really realize the irony there. So that's why I'm very particular about dating intelligently, about choosing somebody who will not just unreasonably tell you no. So if it's ministry wise, I think it's important to work within your area of permission. Personally, I've also found it really beautiful and fulfilling to be able to do a lot of other things that I do. I think that the fact that I have freedom in a lot of areas, where I can wake up and say, I think I'm going to make a film. I think I'm going to write a book. I think I'm going to start this part of my business. And I'm married to somebody who is very supportive about all the things that I do.
I was going
to. Do you understand? So I think that being in those kind of places where I call shots helps me better in the areas where I do not call the shots. I don't know if you understand. Do you understand? And then just really, and I don't feel like I also have to control my husband's life, because there are so many other things that I control on my own. Do you get? So that I think that balance is very, very important. Some people go to the other extreme of I must do my own, and then that puts them in a situation where they are so out of sync with their husband or with the ministry. So that's why I said this kind of question requires wisdom and balance. And sometimes it's also a question of timing. It's also a question of timing. For example, when we were supposed to start the Abuja church, God had told me in August of that year, I think it was in the year 2016. Is it 2016? This year. It's not as that
Sorry,
point.
it's okay.
2017. I think it was the year 2017. I told me that. And I remember asking my husband, did God tell you anything about Abuja? And he said, no, God didn't tell me, because we're just settling down into a new venue, and then you're talking about new branch.
Abuja, no please.
And then in December, around December, end of November, God tells him that. And then there's so many confirmations. And then that's at a time when I had gotten admission to my PhD. So I was supposed to resume at the University of Lagos. I don't have a PhD now, so you can imagine
what happened
there. But by the time we were supposed to move, I just knew that this is what God will have me do. So it was really a no-brainer.
You relocated at the time?
Yeah,
for a bit, I remember.
So we relocated to Abuja, and then I haven't done the PhD largely because of that. But in that season, you could say I was just a pastor's wife, because I was pregnant, newly relocated. I didn't really have enough time to focus on my business. I wasn't really making films. I was writing a couple of books, but then you're pregnant, you can't really travel so much to preach. But in that season of my life, there was a lot of growing. There was a lot of blessing. Do you understand? So sometimes, imagine
you resigned from...
No, I had resigned. I had resigned before
okay.
then. I had resigned before then to focus on book writing and doing other things, and my blogging, and eventually evolved into...
That's true.
Sorry,
what you don't tell.
When I resigned, I thought I was resigning to blog and to support my husband in ministry. I thought like blogging would be... I used to Google how to make money from your blog, right? And then it was blogging that gave birth to my first book as a self-published author, one of my most prominent book, Selfies with Bible Girls.
I love that.
Yeah, and you should have. We've been friends for a while.
Not
the tail.
We are going to be really good-looking grannies.
Yeah, good-looking grannies. Imagine if I said, I don't want to go to Abuja. I want to do my PhD. I must have my own.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say, like, what will God have you do? So filmmaking is something that now I do on my own, Nigerian films, Nigerian publishing. Do you understand? But at that time, what God needed me to be was a supportive wife. Do you understand? And so that's why I'm very careful, because if I say, you must have your own, if you don't have your own, they will see you finish. Do you understand? There are some women who are married, and I'm sorry to say that, to pastors who are irresponsible, sadly, and maybe all those pastors that they're not hardworking, you want to just bring money, they will spend all the money. Do you understand? They don't care about anything, they're not making any efforts. And for a woman like that, you need to have your own, so you can take care of your children. So you can take care of yourself, and many times so you can even take care of the man, be able to
the entire family
take care of. So there's a balance. So that's I'm very careful with generic, but generally speaking, it comes down to what God will have you do. Because at that time it was okay, leave the PhD, and the blessings that have come into my life as a result of the Abuja move and everything that's happened thereafter have been more than a PhD could give me. So I don't wake up thinking, and I know. Do you understand?
Yeah.
But there are going to be times where God will just say, okay, now this is the direction I want you to go. And to be able to not just follow the Lord, but also follow Him, understanding that He doesn't just want you to follow Him and break up your family. Like Master was saying when he was preaching church, some people God will just say, God will just tell them, or they will think they had resign as a man and leave your job and go and do ministry full time, and they won't tell their wife, and then you break the home. So there has to be a level of cohesion within the home. He gave this example about when God told what's her name, Mary, that an angel told her you're going to have a child. It didn't just stop there. After she herself told Joseph, God went and told Joseph again. So that cohesion is very, very important. And then when it came to time for them to run away to Egypt, God told Joseph himself.
Yes.
So it's not a big thing for God to also convince your spouse. And I think that being on the same page is always so important.
So I'm curious about what support should look like for a pastor's wife. I think I should be asking your husband this, but
you can still ask me.
I will ask you because you have received that, like you have said, you've been supportive of your projects. I mean, for some of you who know, I'm on During Ever After.
Hey, Grace!
And on both seasons, Pastor came on set. He hung out with us, and sometimes it's just that, seeing that the person that you're married to is there to celebrate your wins, is rooting for you. He's not being alien to what you're doing. So I mean, what does that support mean to you? And perhaps for women who are watching, or even men who are watching, what should support look like for your pastor, wife, or husband?
I think that this is such a good question, and I would just speak to people who need to receive support. For example, my husband showing up at During Ever After, it's consistent with who he was when we were dating. Because even before we started dating, when he was toasting me, and I just used to toasting like which baby boomers toasting. We're getting old. And then I remember wanting to defend my project, and I just saw one guy from Science and Technology College in a College of Business and Human Development, and what's the called at the time. I said, why? I said, I just came to check on you. Do you understand? So I feel like if you're about to choose a spouse, especially even if you're marrying a pastor, you might need to support him more often because of the call, but you must also pick someone that also supports you. That even the little things that you are doing that may not be as big as a ministry, quote and unquote, there is a kind word. There's just something that shows that he's supportive. And I think another thing we must learn is to understand how our spouses support. So for example, I think it's only one of my books my husband has read from cover to cover, and I have 5 or 6. And just him used to irk me like, dude, why you not reading? You're supposed to be like me. I will read your book before it gets published. I will help you do this. I will help you do that. But if it's filmmaking, like he'll most likely be more hands-on. Like for example, when we did the virtual premiere for Loving Amanda, he was more or less the one that said, you know what, instead of waiting for so many people to buy your film and they're offering you peanuts, why don't you at least do something of your own first? And so he was a sounding board. So there are areas that he's strong at, and his support is more obvious. There are some areas that he's not really strong at. Like my husband likes to read all those big books where they just start speaking Greek and Hebrew, and like he doesn't like the way
you don't write Greek and Hebrew.
He doesn't like the way they're telling stories. What happened? So just his books now, New Testament, Old Testament, just one book, Corinthians, just explaining it from beginning to end. Don't even just give us word. Do you understand? And so there was a time when I used to feel like, would you say you're really supportive of me if you've not read all my books? But there are other areas that he's shown that support, right? And many times it's very easy for us to assume that support should come a specific way. And if it doesn't come that way, then this person doesn't support you. Do you understand? There are some people that you all know they support true. Do you understand? So you have, that's a red flag, especially in a dating relationship. If it's in your marriage, you need to have the conversations. You need to maybe go for counseling. You need to lead by example. Do you understand? So choose somebody who supports you, and then be intentional about the way you read support. Do you understand? My husband is having a video shoot, and it's not in church, I probably won't go. Like if it's a music shoot, I'm like, just if it's a music recording, like, because I will not be able to tell you the difference between. Do you understand? But maybe I would call to say, oh, have you started? How is it going? Oh, let me listen to it. But I will not be saying, do this one. I don't know anything about it. I remember when he was recording something with Sinat, and she asked me a question. Jerry, I said, Ma, as you're looking at me, she said, this one singing in the next song. I said, I can't help you. I don't know. Do you understand? But at least you are showing up for that person. You're giving them the encouraging words. You're giving them time. You're putting your money in their projects. I think that's extremely important. And truly, my husband has really gone above and beyond for me in a lot of ways. And so I think that sometimes it's very easy to maybe be the person in ministry and just expect that this woman should do everything to support me. But I think that it has to go both ways, and that for a woman who maybe is finding herself in a situation where her husband is not supporting her, the way to remedy that is not to withdraw your own support until he gives his own. Because remember, you are serving as unto the Lord. As a pastor's wife, you have to serve as unto the Lord.
And not even to your husband.
Because your husband will, he's a great guy. Like, I met one of the most amazing people I know. But they may not always seem deserving of that. Even I'm sure there are many pastors' wives that have sat down listening to their husband preach on a Sunday after a fight. And they're like, I'm just in their mind, I'm just here because of God. And of course, he will forgive before the end of the service. But if every time he doesn't show up, saying, in fact, I'm not coming to church today, I'm not doing this one, I'm not doing that one. So it has to really be as the Lord. You must see the work of the Lord as separate and his people as important. So we have an issue that needs to be resolved. But maybe it shouldn't be resolved on a Sunday morning. Not because his work is more important than mine, but because the souls are important.
Yeah.
So we can give this some time. Do you understand? And
come back to
one
it.
is not always perfect, but I think that mindset that the work is important because it's as unto the Lord. Not, I supported you in your own ministry, you support me in my own. Therefore, let's scatter everything. I heard about, someone was just telling me about his pastor's wife years ago. She was a white woman. And then, whenever they had an argument on a Sunday morning or just before church, everybody would know, because she would come to church. The pastor is preaching, everybody's facing here. She has turned to face the other side, and her whole face is red.
Of course, she's Caucasian, so
everything will just show. So it really has to be as you must love the man, but you must serve in your marriage and in the work as unto the Lord, and that will help you to, so that you're not burnt out. So it's not a case where you're burnt out, you're pretending that everything is okay. Do you understand? And then many times, in terms of support, you also need not just your husband's support. You need a level of mentorship. You need there should be at least people that you can onboard into. I think that one of the greatest
community of enablers.
And even if it's not a community, because I mean, when you're the pastor's wife, the community that can share with you is plenty. The community you can share with is small.
Yeah.
It's really small. But I think that one of the greatest gifts, for example, that the Lord has given us is we have a marriage counselor that we both love and trust. Do you understand? I have one or two people that I can talk to. He has people that he can talk to. So even if they're not so many, but if they're trusted and they're wise and their foundation is the word of God. And then, of course, you also need, in terms of support, me, I believe in paid and unpaid support. You come to my house, there are many. Do you understand? I have a trusted group of people around me, members of my own team or my family. Like when I had my first son, my mom was with me for 6 months. Do you understand? And that was how she eventually started attending Celebration Church, and now she and my dad attend. So getting help, getting help. You don't have to tell everybody all your problems.
Yeah.
But if I'm really, I can't do what I do now
if you don't have help.
I can't. I can't. And because I can't say, okay, I'm not going to be around, my husband must be the one, because he's also busy.
Yeah.
Right? But just learning to get help and then prioritize. There are some things that I must do myself as a mom, some things I must do myself as a wife. But there's some things that people can help me do. So let's balance those out. I think that's incredibly important.
So there was something you mentioned, and before I go on to, I guess, my second to the last question, it was about, when you quarrel, it's like, well, I'm not going to church with you and all of that. There are pastors' wives who do not attend their husbands' churches.
Where did they attend?
They go to any other parish, or any other church. So I mean, for whatever reason. So I wanted to address that. It may be a yes or no answer, but just give us a bit more context if it's right for a pastor's wife to not attend his church, especially when it's not like a one-man church, for instance, where like it's a parish under a big church, and then she can attend another parish.
This question, I don't want to answer it based on yes or no. Because many times the reason why people act a certain way is not because they don't know that this is right, this is wrong. It's because probably they found themselves in some kinds of situations that make it very difficult. And I always encourage people to pray for their pastors, because you don't really know what they are going through in their marriage. You don't know if they've suffered loss. You don't know if they've been sick. I remember having a lump disappear sometime last year and sharing the testimony. And my husband said, if she didn't share the testimony, you won't know. So many times you don't really know what people are going through in private. And I think that it's important to show your pastors grace. Of course, as leaders, they should be held accountable for their actions. But your pastors and their spouses, it's important that you show them grace. I think that people show up and tell the pastor all their secrets and expect the pastor to treat them with grace. But when they hear or see something that the pastor has done,
Hey.
everywhere will scatter. They don't extend that same grace. So I think it's first of all important to see it from a level of grace. If I saw, for example, now my husband pastors the island, but he's a global league pastor, of course. And then I'm a branch pastor at CCI Keja, so we don't necessarily attend the same branch. But it took a lot of him convincing me, a lot of consideration for us to finally get to this point of where okay, let's do this. I don't think I will ever be comfortable pastoring in a different state from my husband, because it will affect the marriage. When the marriage is affected, the ministry will still be affected anyways. Do you understand? But I said, okay, since it's the same city, we can do this. So I don't attend the same parish with my husband, as you can see.
Well, I mean, so that's understandable. You are still serving under him.
Yes. I was pulling your leg, right? But if I saw a pastor and his wife was worshiping somewhere else, I would be worried. But I wouldn't just come from a place of this is wrong. I would want to know what's going on. If I was close enough to them, I would talk. I would ask them. If I wasn't, I would pray about it. And I think that must be our perspective to things. I wouldn't just go on Instablog or go online and say, I have hot gist. It would be about praying, or at least trying to figure out what's going on. I think it's important that as much as possible, the family unit is together. When people get married in my local church, we always advise them, oh, you are getting married, where are you here? They say, oh, my husband and I said to go. I say, no. To go to different. I said, no, please go to
the same church.
Go to your husband's church. It would not be here that we convinced you to be going to a different church from your husband. So I think it's important that you guys feed from the same place. But sometimes you have so many issues. Some people have situations. I think you had asked me sometime about when women feel like they're not being respected as pastors' wives, and I've not really found myself in that kind of situation. But it's something that I would empathize with, and I would simply say, remember that your worth is in God. And demanding respect from people is not the way to demand respect. It's not the way to get respect. Many times people would be endeared to you when you've invested in yourself and when you've served them. And I think it must be from still a place of as unto the Lord, because even in the church, people can still hurt you even after you've served. So you must be as unto the Lord. He must be your focus, and then just learning to serve people in the capacity that you have permission to serve, and not to worry about even a situation where you are so highly disrespected, and it's a chat to have with your husband and say, this is what's going on. But many times in any human setting, people will treat you the way you treat them, and so if you go out of your way to also show them respect while still maintaining healthy boundaries, I think that will help. I think it was a mommy Becky that said when she sees mommies in the church, and it's something that I've learned to do too. I don't know that to keep my own parents, but if I see somebody's mommy in the church, we have quite a number of them. As you are kneeling down, before you even need that, me too, I'm also kneeling down. So my message was like, two of us to our knees, we meet each other. So if you come from a place of serving people, wanting to get to know them, eventually there's going to be a mutual respect and that honor. But I don't think that you should, even though, like I said, if people don't respect your spouse, they don't respect you. But I don't think that you should come from a place of everybody must bow down to me. Because really, whether as a pastor or as a pastor's wife, you've been called to serve. And I think that's the focus for myself.
Now, before I let you go, there's a thing with saying pastors' wives may not deserve to be glamorous. Sometimes like, this woman, to show that she's praying, to show that she's fasting, to show that she's, laboring for the flock. She shouldn't wear makeup, or she shouldn't wear a nice wig, or have, nice braids on her head. Is there any truth?
Why are you saying braids? Because I'm wearing
it's an example.
Braid.
It's an example. And people sometimes have those. They have those.
Some people thoughts. They don't get joy, so they don't want to make other people get. I wouldn't just say do you. I would say do you as unto the Lord and as unto your husband. I think that decency is definitely important. I'm an advocate for decency anytime, any day. That's what the Bible instructs, decency. And then a gentle and quiet spirit. Yes. So, because somebody can dress, cover everywhere, not wear makeup, and have an ungentle and unquiet spirit.
Yeah.
So, as you are wearing makeup, when the Bible says that your beauty should not be about outward appearance or wearing of jewelry, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't wear jewelry or have outward beauty. That means you should also not wear clothes. But it was just saying that it must come from somewhere. There must be something on the inside, not just something on the outside. So it must have that internal beauty, and then I'm definitely all for decency. But the truth is that some churches are more conservative than some. So if I married into a church that was pretty conservative, do you understand? It only makes sense for me to adjust to a certain level. Do you understand? But it will still come down to pleasing the Lord and pleasing my husband. It will still come, because if it comes to even pastors dressing, my husband is not as conservative as some people. He's a very fashionable guy. I don't know the most spiritual people I know. Cast out demons, heal the sick, instant miracles, great Bible teacher. Do you understand? And so if you're judging him based on how he looks, you're on a long thing. Do you understand? So was he trying to learn one or two things from him? Do you get? But I think it's important to understand the culture where your husband is pastoring in. There are some American pastors that they can wear spaghetti. Me, I know they wear. Do you understand? And I wouldn't. I'm all for decency. I wouldn't judge, but I also wouldn't emulate. Do you understand? So, but I think that decency first, and then the truth is that the kingdom of God is not in eating or drinking or in wearing clothes. It has to be a heart as unto the Lord, and then you have to dress to lead by example. But the truth is that even if you don't dress well, some people will still not like it. You can't even please people. So I think it's beautiful that you express yourself. And then even this pastor's dressing we're talking about, many people are attracted to the work because of the way the pastor dresses. They're like, this fine pastor with this
hair. It's just like this. Let me go and hear what he's saying.
What is he saying? Do you understand? And then some people on the outside just assume that people are just going there because it's somebody commented on the post about my husband a while back, said, oh, women are just thinking with their emotions. They're not even seeing him as a pastor. He's just a fine boy with a big car. I said, what does this one say? This guy because now we have an adopted daughter and 2 biological. There's a father of 3. Yeah. He's been married for 8 years. He's probably more responsible than you that you're talking. I didn't say it that way, but I'm like, you don't know people. And just because he's a fine dresser, and if you are jealous, just say, oh, I'm really jealous. Like, say it with your chest. Do you understand? Say it with your chest. Because many times people project their own insecurities on other people. So you can't really let people project their insecurities on you. Decent dressing, definitely, yes. But I think that you should explore your style. Yeah, so like we're talking about hats, for example. Yes. Although covering of hair is another conversation that we can't have here. But I remember just the hat thing. Like my husband would not want me to wear a hat. He would. And then we don't even cover much. But he wouldn't even want me to wear a hat, like just for the sake of it. Doesn't feel it, something. He doesn't like it. Do you understand? So really, it comes down to.
And you are also okay with it, because for some people it's going to be like, but where I'm coming from, we cover our hair now. But both of you have agreed on that.
Yeah. And then I'm actually not coming from a place where we cover our hair, so it's never really been a thing for me. But I think that when you marry into a ministry, especially if the basics are the basics, salvation by grace through faith, what the gospel is, what salvation is, spiritual gifts, you adopt the culture of the house. Do you understand? As much as possible, but still at least maintain. So while you're not changing who you are, you're at least observing the way things are done there.
In that place.
Do you understand?
Wow, this has been a really exciting conversation, Laju. I'm really thankful to God for our friendship and for the gift of you.
Friend of BellaRose, FL. FOBRL. Oh,
that's too long.
Okay, FBL.
There you go.
FBRL.
What would your advice to any pastor's wife out there who's watching be? Perhaps they feel like they're not celebrated enough. Maybe they don't have, quote unquote, a thing of their own. Because I mean, we can't take away from the fact that right now you are one of the most celebrated people when it comes to Christian content. I think yes now. Do you know where I go to? It's like LajuIren. It's one of them. You go to CCI. I'm like CCI member by association.
I love it.
But that's the truth. I think that and God has used you to shed light, lots of light onto the Christian content space. I think it's really amazing. But there are some women out there who feel like I'm not even doing anything. I don't feel like I'm making any impact. I don't feel like I'm anything more than just a pastor's wife. What would you advise me to do?
I think that I would go back to where we started from, which is that what defines you has to be who you are, and not what you do. Do you understand? It has to be who you are, like just resting in the fact that God knows me, He sees me, and building a personal relationship with Him and figuring out what He would have you do. And then many times we also have to do with what vocation demands. There was a time where I needed my day job to keep our family afloat. When we first got married, I was working for like 5 years as a journalist. I think that's how we even met the first time I worked as a journalist, right? My husband worked for about a year before he went into ministry full time. So it comes down to what is needed. If you have 5 kids that are small, 5 kids under 5, you may not be able to be a filmmaker at this point in time. And I remember there have been times in my life where I was just pregnant. I was just a mom on bed rest. I'm not preaching anywhere. I'm not doing anything. Do you understand? And so it has to come from resting in the fact that even when Usain Bolt is not running, he's still Usain Bolt. He's still the fastest man in the world. Do you understand? And then many of those times and seasons will prepare you for what God will have you do. It will teach you something. You will go through something. You will learn something. Sometimes that dissatisfaction can come from a nudging where God actually wants you to step out and do something. But it shouldn't be from a place of feeling insecure or feeling like you have to do something to become something. It should be just an unsettling. Like when I have to do something new, I feel the Lord may be pushing me in a particular direction. But it's not about, let me do these things so that people will know that I'm not just. So motive is extremely important. And then, like I said, times and seasons too. Understanding the times and seasons of your life is so important.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the podcast, and thank you so much, Laju, for being on this episode. It's been really exciting. God bless you. As much as possible, guys, make sure that you support, follow, and engage with all the content that Laju has out there. It is benefiting the Christian community a lot, and God is glorified at the end of the day. So
it's my signature post.
Thanks
for coming.
Thanks for coming. And bye.
If you don't subscribe, you will be seeing us in your dream. That's a choice. Hello, this is Pastor Mrs LajuIren. Please don't call me that, call me PL. Or A2ZL. Anyway, you're watching the Pastor Mrs podcast with the only BellaRose Okoche. Don't forget to subscribe. Hey, what am I saying? Don't forget to subscribe. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Glory, glory.